Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Susanne Demel, for the very kind introduction. Today, we will discuss codes of conduct, this solution for third country data transfer. And while it was broadly discussed during the last weeks how the ECJ ruling Schrems 2 impacts the existing tools for third country data transfer, it was not that broadly discussed if there are not other tools at hand that might help find a solution in this regard. I'm talking about the solution that GDPR actually foresees explicitly, which is codes of conduct for the purpose of third country data transfer. Today, I would like to discuss with our panelists where the added value of such a tool could be, what the differences to other tools for third country data transfer are, and maybe also what the challenges are to actually get such a project on the street. I'm very happy to welcome our panelists for the discussion. First of all, I have to mention that David Stevens unfortunately couldn't make it, but nonetheless, I think we have one of the leading experts with us in this field, who is Antoine, the legal advisor responsible at the Belgian Data Protection Authority for third country data transfer and codes of conduct. We have Barbara Cosgrove with us, Vice President and Chief Privacy Officer, Workday. Nathaly Ray, Head of Data Protection, Public Policy, Government Relations, EMEA, Google Cloud. And Hilary, Wandall, Senior Vice President, Privacy Intelligence and General Counsel at TrustArc. Welcome, everyone. So perhaps, if I may, Antoine, I would like to start with a question in your direction. Your authority is very well known to be one of the strongest advocates for codes of conduct. I remember David Stevens, pretty early after he went into office, started talking about and encouraging the industry to start developing codes of conduct. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about the views of your authority on that tool, why you are such a strong supporter, and of course, what hopes you have in regards to third country data transfer?
Yeah, thanks Jörn, for the invitation. It's been what, I think 2 years that we've been working together on the EU cloud, and basically it's the reason why the Belgian DPA thinks that it's a promising tool is because it basically creates a space on which you can have the regulator discussing with a sector and companies belonging to a sector. And so very, very shortly, the procedure for the approval of code of conduct creates a lot of back and forth. And from the moment we have the code owner coming to us and basically with a code of conduct, with a draft code of conduct and asking, is what we're doing, what we want to do, okay? From the moment we deliver approval, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of issues are raised on I think, crucial points. So that's really what makes it interesting, I would say. It's the fact that codes of conduct creates a platform to foster discussions on specific processing. So that would be my answer.
And can you go a little bit further in direction of third country data transfer? Is that just applicable to this area, or do you expect any kind of advantages using this tool in the area of third country data transfer?
Absolutely, yeah. So just the first thing is that the DPB and we are preparing guidelines on the use of codes of conduct as tools for transfers. And basically the great thing with, and so just to say we don't have all the answers at the moment, but we're trying to really play with that new tool that is the code of conduct. And I can say two things. So the first thing is that the key word when it comes to code of conduct is added value. And so the great thing, which by using codes of conduct as tool for transfer, is that not only you get the safeguards that you need to transfer data outside of the EEA, but on top of that, you get those safeguards tailored to a specific sector. So it's really that custom-made approach that makes code of conduct a really interesting tool. The other thing is that you can say that, yeah, but there are other tools available at the moment. So I'm thinking SCC, standard contractual clauses, as well as binding corporate rules. But standard contractual clauses, for example, they have there's something that's a bit difficult, that they have to be completed for every processing. So back before the GDPR, we've seen when we still had to review standard contractual clauses, we've seen major companies coming with thousands of SECs. So it creates a lot of problems, a lot of papers. So unlike SEC's code of conduct, everything is in one code, and you can cover a lot of your processing in one code. Unlike BCRs, it's a transfer tool that helps that helps a group of undertakings transfer data between the same group. And so it's a great tool, but it's quite limited. So the message that we want to convey is really that it's a new tool that we're trying to make complementary to other existing tools.
Very, very interesting. Thank you, Antoine. Maybe moving on to Barbara. Barbara, Workday is, from the very early beginning of the EU Cloud CUC, one of the strongest supporters. You invested a lot of resources in creating the content, and also you are actually the first company that declared adherence to it, to the GDPR version. And I also remember the two of us were speaking, I think, several years ago in San Francisco about the topic, and you yourself were actually one of the first that saw the possibilities and the advantages of such a tool, a code of conduct. So can you please tell us a little bit what your experiences are now, being a few years in the process, why you think it's a valuable tool, and why you think, like now from the industry perspective, moving this tool into the area of third country data transfer?
Sure, thank you. So I'm the Chief Privacy Officer of Workday, and for those of you who don't know, Workday is a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications for finance, human resources, and planning. And I say that because it's important for you to understand that we're acting as a data processor for our customers' very sensitive global enterprise data. And as an enterprise company, we need to have our customers trust in what we're doing, how we're processing the data in compliance with data protection regulations. And so as a global company, we believe it's really important to engage with other companies as well as policymakers who are trying to make a better, more trusted future for all cloud customers. And so we joined the General Assembly of the EU Cloud Code of Conduct to really work with others in our industry and coming up with a framework that would help to demonstrate and assure our customers and regulators of compliance with GDPR. And we already had, when you and I met a couple of years ago, a well-established privacy compliance program. It included SOC audits. It included ISO certifications. We have binding BCR, processor BCRs. But we were looking for a way that would make it easier and more transparent for our customers to be able to analyze compliance with GDPR specifically for a cloud service provider, in a way for customers to be able to have that mapping and understand that a company was doing the right thing, not just trust, but a verify approach. And we believe that the code of conduct really is an important role to play when it comes to that enforcement of data protection as well. And going to it in the work that we put into it, behind the code is a really comprehensive controls catalog. And it helps a company demonstrate or evidence compliance for its industry in a way where you can map your controls in a practical, technology neutral way to the code of conduct. And it doesn't end there. What really adds the value is that you have the ongoing independent monitoring from a European entity. And we have found that really helpful as we're going through our second year of assurance, to have that dialogue and walk through the controls in a detailed way to explain how we're complying with it with this European monitoring body. And so in terms of being one of the first to declare adherence, we really think it sets a bar for cloud providers in terms of demonstrating compliance. And now we're very proud to be part of this new initiative in terms of adding the new third-party country data transfer module. As we're all continuing to talk about compliance post the Schrems II decision, I think it's really important to focus on that monitoring aspect that comes along with the codes of conduct, as well as the approval by the data protection authorities. And so we find it to be a very helpful one in terms of having conversations with our customers around trust, in terms of evidencing compliance. And I'm hopeful that this new module will continue to be a way that we can demonstrate that, as a cloud company, we are to be trusted and we're doing the right things with our customers' data.
Mm-hmm. Before I maybe move on with questions to the other speakers, maybe because you mentioned it so broadly now, the monitoring aspect. I think this is something that is one of the key differentiators to any other transfer tool that we have here. And maybe I ask in the whole round of speakers. I think we are confronted with a situation coming from the ECJ ruling, where the ECJ made pretty clear that now a case-by-case analysis is necessary. You put it, so to say, on the shoulders of data exporters and controllers, which I believe is really something they would struggle with in the real world. Maybe we jump in a little bit, and I ask anyone who would like to speak, how you think that the monitoring can help actually to overcome this issue coming from the ECJ ruling, and by that create a strong differentiator perhaps to other transfer tools. Who would like to start?
Do you want me to continue there, and then I can pass it on? Sure. So after the ruling, we took a step back and made sure that we went through and drafted transfer impact assessment questions in terms of how we're looking at the transfers, the risk for the type of data that we have, how we would respond in the event we ever were to get a government access request, which for human resources data we feel is very unlikely, and documented that. But I believe you're right, having a module where a code where you can demonstrate how you're putting that program in place would be really helpful to have that ongoing monitoring. Right now, we're doing a lot of discussions with customers and demonstrating it in terms of this documentation, but long-term having some sort of compliance module would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Nathaly? Please, Hilary, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that point. It's one I feel very strongly about. It's so important during this time where organizations are struggling with trying to understand exactly what to do. Obviously, we've all read the Schrems 2 decision and understand the criticality of a case-by-case analysis, but organizations are struggling with how to put that into practice. And so the benefit of the transfer module being part of the code is to provide clarity and certainty to organizations in how to think through that. Carrying it through to the monitoring point that you raised earlier, the benefit for organizations in having that monitoring component for the analysis as well is it gives them something to look to in terms of the verification. As Barbara said already, a verification that you've not only gone through that analysis, but that analysis meets a standard that's recognized, provides greater certainty within the broader ecosystem, and I think is a really important part of helping organizations with the struggles that they're having right now.
Mm-hmm. Nathaly, you would like to jump in on this topic?
Thank you, Jörn. I think the benefit is you clearly have a monitoring entity that it's expert both in the GDPR compliance, but also in the industry in particular. So having someone that can really help data controllers in this assessment of technical measures and legal and organizational measures when it comes to assessing adequate protection is a value that the Code of Conduct will add to this equation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Antoine, really important opinion what you think about monitoring, since you are the one that needs to perform the accreditation at the end of the day.
I mean, just even if the monitoring body is obviously without prejudice to the prerogatives of the data protection authorities, just as a way of it's a bit of a joke, but then we can take all the help we need at the moment, and I would say it's really great to have. So if you take the GDPR, the fact that a company adheres to a code of conduct is something that regulators have to take into account when they think about sanctions, and I think that we could extend that. It creates also trust to see that a company has committed to something, that those commitments are implemented, and that you have an independent body that checks the compliance with those commitments. I think that it's for a regulator, it's definitely I would say, a good sign, and even if it's not, I would say, a legal concept, it sends the right message, and that's quite important. On top of that, I would say that it's also way easier, even if it's not exclusive, but it's way easier to interact with a monitoring body that can bring certain issues that an entire sector is encountering. It's way easier, obviously, to have one middle man or one middle woman to interact with, rather than to go to all the companies, which at the moment all have the same problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then moving on to the next topic, Nathaly. Google Cloud was among the first that actually joined the EU Cloud COC, so also a very early supporter of the whole process. Can you speak a little bit about how it helps in the daily work of a compliance team to have such a standard at hand? And I would also like to know that there's always kind of a hard balancing between, on the one side, having a robust privacy policy at hand and proving and showing to your customers compliance with privacy regimes. But on the other hand, you also need to stay, as a highly innovative company, you need to stay in a way innovation friendly and open, and not only for the sake for your products, but also because possible implementations of GDPR and IT security might change over time and could even be stronger. If you could go in this direction, that would be really interesting.
Sure. So at Google Cloud, we decided to become one of the first supporters of the code for a number of good reasons. First, we're absolutely committed to helping our customers with their compliance journey. So we believe that a code can facilitate their work and increase, ultimately, in line to what Barbara said, the level of assurance that you can get from us as a cloud provider. Second, we do believe that the code is an excellent tool to promote trust in the cloud, and in particular to promote transparency and accountability. On the one hand, it can outline certain data protection best practices in terms of an entire industry, things like sub-processors policies, processing limitations, portability capabilities, security, physical security, logical security, personal security, because as it was mentioned earlier, you have a full controls catalog in there. So that's tremendously helpful for a customer in terms of conducting the risk assessment. On the other hand, you have the accountability part that is a mean and a way for you to demonstrate compliance with your customers. But it's also a tool that the customer can use to demonstrate their own compliance with their customers, with their auditors, with their supervisory authorities as well. And then third, we believe that the codes are a very effective instrument to collaborate among industry and data protection authorities when it comes to tailoring some GDPR requirements to a particular use case. Let's think about audits, for example. We know that GDPR grants unlimited audit rights to data controllers over processors. Now, in the cloud, you commonly find solutions and services that scale to millions of customers. And it wouldn't make sense to have hundreds of people working around a data center. That will actually undermine the security of the services, that will go against all the customer base. So this is an example of areas in which you can work together with industry, with the data protection authorities to come up with creative solutions that are practical, that can be operationalized, and in a way that still complies with both the letter and the spirit of the law. So I can, only see the benefit of this new data transfer model. We live at a time where robust and durable data transfer mechanisms are not only important but urgent. So I can only encourage cloud providers and cloud customers to join this initiative so we can, as an industry, come together with good solutions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now that we learned in a way what kind of benefits this tool might bring once it's on the street, it's not yet. Hilary, maybe in your direction. You help with TrustArc many companies around the globe of all sizes to be compliant with law regimes, with standards. Can you perhaps speak a little bit about, first of all, what you think coming from your customer side is the demand for such a tool? Is there something where you would say, okay, that is something our customers would like to have and see? And on the other hand, maybe, so to say, moving more on in the direction of challenges. So where do you think maybe, or what are the success factors? What do we need to achieve as someone who has seen a lot of standards? Where do we need to go if we want to make this a success?
Yeah, great question, Jörn. So maybe I'll start back in the day when we first started looking at certification and accountability type regimes. It goes back a couple of decades. And as you pointed out, we have been in our business, which is in part, we actually have a subsidiary of our business that's focused on certification, but as a participant in the Cloud Code of Conduct, we also are a cloud service provider as a technology platform provider for privacy solutions. So we have those two different sides of the business. But on the certification side of our business, we've been very focused on helping organizations be able to demonstrate accountability. Before that word was in vogue and recognized in GDPR, it was something that was part of the role that we played as a certification provider, recognizing that a lot of organizations, in order to be able to conduct business appropriately in the digital or formerly e-commerce system, wanted to be able to show that they were trustworthy. And that's something organizations have been seeking for some time. And the reason so is that they feel that it helps them gain more customers. As many of the other colleagues in the panel have said, demonstrate trust. And this matters a lot for organizations. Going to a point that Antoine made earlier around the many SCCs that organizations have shown and have had to enter into over time, when that was the primary basis for moving data that they have relied on historically. One of the things we have found is that a lot of organizations, and I'll use just what Barbara shared as an example, would prefer to be able to show that they have a robust privacy program in place, one that is able to meet the controls, such as the controls catalog that's relevant for our code, and to be able to rely on that as a primary basis for being able to enter into engagements with business-to-business customers, and also to be able to hold themselves out to the world as being a trustworthy business. And many organizations, what we have seen over time, feel that that is a much better approach to actually putting the right kind of practices in place within their organizations, being able to institute a recognition of what that means across the business stakeholders that are responsible for upholding those standards. And it's much more ingrained in the practices of an organization than just relying on a legal department to enter into a bunch of transactional mechanisms to be able to say, yes, we've met the letter of what the paper says, but not necessarily instilling those practices. So in summary, in terms of the role of a code overall and the importance of this to the ecosystem, it really, in our view, does instill that level of accountability that a lot of organizations are striving to have in place. And then also that they then demand of others with whom they engage in doing business. So whether it's a business-to-business transaction or otherwise people that they are relying on to further support them as their vendors and sub-processors, having that kind of standard promotes a higher level of accountability and responsibility across all organizations. In terms of the uptake and the market satisfaction of adoption of something like this, I think one of the things that's important is that when organizations are recognized, that they actually are proactive in going out and demonstrating to others that that is something that they have achieved. And so oftentimes having a seal, something you can hold out to the public. We do know a lot of organizations like to have a press release to say that they've met a particular standard, to have that shown prominently on their websites as a way of saying, this is something we've achieved isn't that good, you should seek to do the same. And then further embedding that into an expectation within the contracts that they enter into with their sub-processors and their vendors. One of the things we've seen over time is that a way of getting others to meet the same standard is to say to your subcontractors, to your vendors, if you want to do business with us, we expect you to meet this standard as well. Within X period of time, you should actually make sure that you've met demonstrated adherence to a code. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there with respect to the code overall. And lastly, I'll just reemphasize the point I made earlier with respect to third-party module. I'm super excited about this because we are seeing across the board that just, as I said already, organizations do not know what to do. They've read, but what does this mean in practice? And so the sophisticated organizations like Workday, Barbara, Nathaly, and Google, they have the experience to know what to do, but there are a lot of other organizations that are just absolutely at a loss. They're sending over the SCCs, please just sign, but they're not putting supplemental clauses in. They've not necessarily gone through the review. So giving people guidance as to how to do this well and having monitoring to actually support that, we think is absolutely essential as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that goes in direction what Antoine said when we say we want to create something that is tailor-made for a specific sector. You spoke about one important aspect of cloud computing is, of course, the processing chain that can be very complex, and ensuring trust through the whole chain. I think this is one of the main challenges we face. I think we already took the challenge with the main baseline code of conduct, and now we have to somehow transfer it to the third country data transfer module. But now, speaking also about supplementary measures, maybe coming back to Antoine, we know that there are, and you mentioned it, there are guidelines in the making by the EDPB that shall help any kind of initiative that wants to create a code of conduct for third country data transfer to actually know where they should be aiming for. Can you already give us a sneak peek on what we are about to expect when these guidelines come out, and perhaps when they will come out?
So I'll have to be very disappointing, Jörn, but I guess you knew that before asking the question. But no, what I can say is that the guidance is obviously meant to help all players, because again, what I'm always saying is basically that with that judgment, we're all in the same boat. We're all asking ourselves the same question, companies as well as regulators. What do we do now, basically? And so it's an idea that our DPA has, is that when those guidance will come out, there will probably still be questions regarding the assessment, because at the end of the day, it's quite simple. The burden kind of is first on the exporter, on the companies, as well as on the public services also, because we're forgetting about them, but the judgment is for public as well as a private sector. And then if they don't make the right assessment, we'll be there obviously to stop the transfer. But so our idea is basically that when it is better to make the risk assessment altogether. And so basically the idea, and again, I just want to insist on the fact that it's a new tool that we're all trying to play with, and we're trying to see what the opportunities presented by the tool are. And that's what we want. We want to have a platform on which we can discuss the way to go regarding general compliance as well as transfers. And that seems to be offered by codes of conduct. And the other thing I wanted to say, I think it's quite important. The word accountability has been mentioned many times. Obviously, accountability is on the companies, on the exporter in the case of transfers. But I think that it's important. It's a bit provocative, but also to mention that as regulator, there's also a form of regulator's accountability. Is that it translates in the case of codes of conduct, because basically a sector comes to us with a proposal. But if we do this with our transfers, with our processing, is that okay, basically? And from that moment, we'll have to provide them with an answer. It can be no, that you should add that, and that's what we've been working on for a couple of years now, Jörn, as you know well. And at the end of the day, again, we're discussing with our counterparts from all over Europe, and the DPB as a whole has to give an opinion. And again, the word certainty has been mentioned by Nathaly, Barbara, and Hilary. It's about certainty. It's about giving a direction to a sector.
Mm-hmm. I think for this whole tool, what is a key differentiator is also something that was now mentioned many times. It's, so to say, in the hands of the industry and the data protection authority. It moves away from this whole political level. And I think there's the aspect that is really important to make it a success is actually how well does that relationship work. And I think this is something that is more like also, so to say, important for the success of such a project, but also kind of a soft success to actually foster understanding between DPAs and the industry. Perhaps maybe one of my final questions now, maybe first from the industry side. What is your experience with this negotiation relationship, how it helped? Maybe starting with Barbara, Nathaly, Hilary, and then I would hand over to Antoine also to give us an impression on this. How that worked out in the past with codes of conduct in other fields than third country data transfer.
In terms of having the discussions between industry, the monitoring body, and the DPAs, is that the
exactly.
context?
Yes. So when we create the content, so to say, that it goes direction what Nathaly said with her example of the right to audit, for example, that we find a practical solution together.
That was a very interesting exercise as we went through and we're building out the control catalog and then working through the approvals, which hopefully will come soon for the code. But being able to get that feedback and guidance along the way, because as a cloud company, we want to be doing the right thing and we want to have a program that our customers can trust in. So being able to discuss with our peers how we're interpreting it, but also get that feedback from not only the independent body, but also from the regulators along the way is incredibly helpful, because if you want to do the right thing, you want to be building it in from early on. So having that feedback along the way is incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. Nathaly, your view?
So you all will be familiar with ISO, for example. We have ISO 27001, 27017 for the cloud, 18. So, and you will see there, you will remind some controls and then some implementation guidance. I think that the magic of this is that we can think of some sort of controls catalog and implementation guidance that is specific for the cloud. And that collaboration between the data protection authorities and the industry in coming up with creative but robust, rock-solid solutions, I've found it extremely valuable on the development of the main code.
Hilary and then Antoine?
I guess the further comment I would add is having spent a lot of time working through binding corporate rules of approval in my past life. I think the engagement between an individual company and a regulator in coming to an understanding of what the expectation is in terms of your company's practices and how that will be implemented is a very helpful one. And I think that the code of conduct experience that we have had in going through this is exponentially even more valuable, because it's not only the practices of a single company, it's looking across an entire sector or a set of practices within industry where there is, and I'll go back to the word certainty we've talked about a few different times throughout, it creates a level of certainty as the expectations of practices within that particular sector, within that particular aspect of practices. And that where everyone then is, who's adhering to a code is expected to meet the same standard. And the regulator can have an expectation, because they've been so much of a part of it, that this is how people will engage. This is how people will demonstrate that they're meeting these requirements. I just think it's a really invaluable experience at creating trust and certainty and confidence in the practices of organizations, as opposed to a letter of the law and everybody's sort of going after it in their own way. So I think it's been a really, really useful experience. And I too look forward to the place in which we have an approved code.
Antoine? And by the way, the final statement of this session, we're running out of time, so it's in your hands now, Antoine.
Sure, yeah, such pressure. No, so basically, the whole procedure really forced us to, instead of providing, as Hilary mentioned, general guidance to many sectors, actually, it really forced us to dive in the processing and the core issues encountered by an entire sector, and that really is what made it tremendously interesting. And as Nathaly mentioned, we were forced kind of to really answer and find an agreement on such things as audits within the cloud sectors. And I think that's a first, and that seems to be very promising. And I also look forward to the approval of the code.
A great final word, Antoine. Thank you, Hilary. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Nathaly. Thank you, Antoine, for your time. I think we can discuss even longer, maybe many hours, but now we have to finish. But in case anyone would like to know more, reach out to the speakers. I think it's possible on the event platform of Bitkom. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to the audience, and see you all soon. Let's get the work done. Thank you.
Thank you.